questions. Boy, do we have a lot of them. But what if those questions could be answered with a simple email? Now is that time, and welcome to Chat with Charlie. Host Charlie Lynn is a certified spiritual life coach and psychic medium. She will work together with Spirit to answer both your submitted and live questions. Not only will Charlie be providing you with insight, but also interviews with amazing guests. Have a question? Submit it now to chatwcharlie@gmail.com. That's chatwcharlie@gmail.com. Here's your host of Chat with Charlie, Charlie Lynn.
Good morning, and thank you all for tuning into episode 2 of Chat with Charlie on WLTK-DB Talk Radio. I'm your host, Charlie Lynn. I am really excited about today's show. I want to thank everybody who has sent in questions. I have 3 pages of questions today, so we might not get to cover all of them, but we're going to go through, kind of break some of them down. Some are kind of more in-depth questions. And I just want to remind you guys, my answers to these questions, there's a broad spectrum of psychics and mediums, how we do things, how we receive information. And this is my experience. This is things that I've learned, things that work for me. It may not be the same for everybody. So just keep that in mind, that we're looking at it from just a different angled perspective. So one thing I wanted to kind of talk about before we move into answering questions is a message from Spirit that I was given earlier this week. And some of you might have seen it. I had shared a little TikTok video on my page with the message, but it's really kind of been impressed on me throughout the last couple of days. And the message from Spirit was, don't be the device of your own limitation. And what does that mean? Not being the device of our own limitation means so much for everybody. It means something different for everybody. And so how are we limiting ourselves? How are we not stepping into the things that we need to be stepping into is really, to me, what this is about. So many of us, we know what we want to do. We know what we want to be in alignment with. We know what we want to achieve. How do we not limit ourselves? Because what we think, what other people think, really plays into that aspect of limiting ourselves. And so how do we move away from that? And that it's hard, because the reason that we're limiting ourselves is different for everybody else. For me, knowing that I wanted to move into an aspect of servitude for Spirit, I was limiting myself. Well, why? When I broke it down, I was limiting myself out of fear. I was limiting myself out of actually fear of failure. So not just fear of people going, oh man, she's crazy. She thinks she can talk to Spirit. She hears voices. She sees things. But outside of that, it was also the fear of failure. Moving into an aspect of leaving my 9-to-5 job and stepping into this is a huge fear. You don't want to let down your family. You don't want to let down yourself. And so I dragged my feet. But I do feel like with Spirit coming in and giving us this message, they're saying, first of all, examine. So examine where you want to progress to. Examine what your goals are, what your aspirations are. And then look at what is stopping you from making those steps. Sometimes it's just because we're comfortable with where we're at. And so, we might want a little bit more, but right here in this spot that I'm in, I'm safe. I know what I can expect every day. It's easy. It's the flow. It's the routine. But yet you're still not achieving completely and surrendering completely into what your soul wants, to what you're here to accomplish or to what you want to gain. And so really start looking at that, looking at what you're doing to set these limitations for yourself. And then once you go, okay, you know what, maybe it's just I'm comfortable in this. Okay, well, what do I have to lose? So start looking at within your limitations. you know you're staying in this spot because you're comfortable. Well, if you step out of the comfort zone, what really do you have to lose? You know, and for me, yeah, I left a really good 9-to-5 job. I wasn't really happy with what I was doing, but the finances were there. The economical support that I needed was there. And so when I looked at, okay, what if I step out of this? Okay, well, it's going to be a sacrifice for my family because I'm not going to be bringing in the same income. But if I step into this and let's say I give myself a time frame, say I'm going to do this for 6 months, see if I'm building clientele, see if I'm progressing the way I need to progress. I'm still employable. I still have and I still retain the same skill set that I had when I was working a 9-to-5 job. And so because I left that job, that doesn't mean if I give this 6 months and people are just like, you know what, she's crazy, she shouldn't be doing this, I'm still employable. I can still go back out and I can still get a job. And so what am I really losing? I'm not losing anything. And then after you look at that and you make those steps, and it was the same for me, I had these opportunities come up, like sitting here and doing this show and talking to you guys. And I dragged my feet on that for weeks. And I sat down and I talked to my husband and he said, why? This is what you left your job to do. Why then are you not taking the steps outside of this to move into closer what you want to achieve? And so just because we make the big jump doesn't mean we do not continue to limit ourselves in little steps as we progress, as we go on. And so that's also something you need to consider during your growth. As you are moving through these things, are you again limiting yourself? Are you again saying, okay, I made this big step and this big jump, but oh man, I don't want to invest in this next step. Why? So just bringing yourself into that present mindset and bringing yourself into the mindset of looking and examining, because sometimes fear is there to make us reassess things, but also it can lie. It can deter you from what you're there to achieve. And so really this week, especially with me being mental health awareness, you know, focusing on, this is a big aspect of self-care. You know, so many of us go through that safe routine, but we're not achieving what we want, which makes us feel empty, which can perpetuate some of these mental health concerns, you know, the depression, the frustration. So self-care, self-support, you know, we spend so much time supporting other people's goals and their ambitions. You know, for me, I'm a mom, so I'm supporting my kids doing all these sports. I'm trying to support my family emotionally and being there and being able to do these things. But how was I before I decided, you know what, I deserve to give this an opportunity? How was I self-supporting me? And that really weighed on my mental health, on my happiness. So keep this all in mind, you know, your mindset. There's no shame. There's absolutely no shame in stepping out and trying and maybe not succeeding to the point that you thought you should have. But I want to tell you right now, just trying, just stepping out is really success. You know, so many successful people, you take these little steps and you don't succeed right away. And I can tell you right now, if I would have stayed within that 9-to-5 job that I was in, miserable, and I would have never tried, that would have first of all been a regret for me. Why didn't I give this the opportunity to see what it could turn into? But there's no way you're going to succeed if you don't try. You know, Wayne Gretzky, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. And life is no different. You might jump out, you might try something, and you may not succeed to the point that you thought you were going to, but you tried. You have to try if you want to take those steps. And so really just, I don't want to talk about this the whole morning because I do want to get to some questions, but really focus on that message from Spirit in your life, the things that they're impressing upon you to do. How are you being a device of your own limitation? You know, and also don't limit other people. Don't be the person where if somebody comes to you and says, you know what? I've decided I'm going to start a show on WLTK-DB talk radio. I'm going to try to be the Dear Abby for the spirit world. Don't be the person that says, oh, really? Do you think that's a good idea? Support other people, support their ideas, support their dreams. That's how we continue to come together. That's how we continue to support people. Okay? So really focus on that. Focus on how we are being our own device of limitation. The next thing I want to remind all the viewers out there, and hello everybody, is I really appreciate you to be here. And today, drop in a comment if you have already sent in questions. At the end of the show, I will be, going through the comments, looking at people who sent in questions and picking somebody that has done that to receive a free 3-card email reading, where I just kind of do an intuitive 3-card draw for you, send you an email based on the cards that I receive. So if you want to be entered into that, please drop in a comment, because otherwise I don't know you're here. Okay, so I want to go on before we got about 5 minutes before our first break, and I want to talk about an email I received from Erica A. She had asked a question last week, but she sent me another email, which I appreciated. And she says, "Hey, Charlie, your first show was really great, and I appreciate you answering my questions. I plan on using your meditation link. But your show brought up a new question for me. Since psychics and mediums aren't cookie-cutter copies of one another, the things we feel drawn towards won't be the same, I assume. That being said, is there ever one type of religion, ethnicity, background that you feel more drawn to? For example, a lot of things I am drawn to are Native American in origin, or I see Native American spirits." And I thought that was a great question. Good morning, Dubra. Sherry, I really don't know how to say your last name. Is it Lafoon? I hope I'm getting that right. If I'm not, please holler at me and let me know how to pronunciate that. I appreciate you tuning in. Thank you. So I sat and I really reflected on that. And one thing I think, even before we dive into the question, is understanding religion versus spirituality. So religion defines a system of formally organized beliefs and practices centered around worship of higher power. But within religion, there's also different things. So there's universal religion, which would give you, your Christian or people that identify as Catholic, and then ethnic religions. So like in America, the Anishinaabe, which is the indigenous people, is a religion that is centered within their Native American culture, and that would be considered an ethnic religion. When you look at spirituality, that is being more concerned with the human spirit or the soul and not the physical, which usually I refer to as like the dogma of religion, the outline that was put there by people versus the context within the religion that I would relate to spirituality. And one thing I have found is when you are looking at especially the ethnic religions, and you are not within that ethnicity, but yet you say you may identify as that, some people can see that as being culturally insensitive. And so for me, there's a little bit of a struggle. And I have talked to people, especially within the Native American cultures, and some of them are very supportive, because there are times I feel drawn more to what I would call old ways of doing things versus following more the Christian religious outlines. And within those conversations, I have found both support for that ideology and frustration, because they're viewing it as not being part of that ethnic community. And so it's hard, because you may not find acceptance within some of those ethnic cultures that you feel drawn to. That being said, I have had lots of conversations with people that discuss why we may be pulled more to one thing. Like you're saying that you feel pulled more to Native American cultures and relate more to that aspect within your spirituality. And that could be because in a past life, you may have had a Native American experience. You may have been within that culture, or you may have connected with people within that culture. So there's lots of different thought processes and explanations. Personally, for me, a lot of times when I am sitting down within my spirituality, I connect with like the old ways of doing things, with herbs, with rocks, earthy materials, and those kinds of things. And when I sit down in my meditation, a lot of times I will get, Native American spirits coming in. I will also get what people refer to as gypsies coming in, which to me is a symbolism of the old country and the old ways of doing things. So I think for everybody, it's different what you are going to feel drawn to. I think that's completely normal, what is resonating with your soul versus what we're taught we should connect with in this current time. And so you have to really just follow what feels right for you. If you feel like this is where you're connecting and you want to start studying, within a different religion or a different ethnic religion, I think that's fantastic. Just keeping in mind that we're always being respectful when we are trying, especially entering into a different ethnic religion, and that people may see that as being culturally insensitive. So really just try to find a group that is really going to support you with your transition, or with learning the proper ways of the rituals or the things that they do within their culture. So that was a great question. I really appreciate that question. I think we're going to cut to a break, actually, because I don't want to get into the next question and then have to shortchange it. So we're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we will be answering more questions from our viewers. Remember, you can submit questions to me via email at chatwcharlie or in the comments. We'll see you guys back in a minute.
A certified spiritual life coach, animal communicator, past life regression, and a psychic medium. This is Charlie Lynn. Charlie Lynn and Chat with Charlie work with you to bring communication and understanding from spirit to those looking to gain insight. Charlie Lynn's spiritual journey has brought her to you, so take advantage and contact Charlie Lynn today. Book a reading, indulge in some Reiki work, or take the next step in your life with some spiritual life coaching. No matter, Charlie Lynn is here to help you. Search Chat with Charlie on Facebook. That's Chat with Charlie on Facebook.
Welcome back, everybody. It is 20 after the hour, and you are back with Charlie Lynn here at WLTK-DB Talk Radio. I really just want to remind you guys to pop into the comments if you have any questions that are coming up. Good morning, Jackie. How are you today? And so while I'm waiting to see if any of you guys want to pop into the comments, I wanted to talk about some of the other questions that we received. So one question I received was from Beth Y. And I feel like this really ties in with the topic that we are talking about. And she's asking, how do you handle self-doubt? Right? So that ties into being part of our own limitation. And because our self-doubt really limits us, that is also part of our ego. And how do we deal with that? Well, the first thing is, for me, it was naming my ego. What so that I could self-identify it if I could treat it like a person. I can't tell you what I call my ego on here because we don't want to be censored, but it's not a nice name. And for me, that's just my way of being like, hey, listen, I'm not doing this, and moving that out and away. But self-doubt is really something that I feel like just looking at our daily, how we're limiting ourselves, looking at how we're doubting ourselves, because our self-doubt is part of that limitation, and trying to correct it. So for every, negative thought of, you know what, Charlie, you can't do this, I try to bring in a positive of, I can do this. I'm helping people. I am being a resource. I'm getting information out there. And it just becomes retraining your thought process. So for every, self-doubt that comes in, address it, look at it. Why do I have this self-doubt? But then try to replace it with positive reinforcements. So I hope that makes sense. For me, that's really a technique that has worked great since I've been doing it, probably for like the last year. And so just replacing those questions of self-doubt with something positive. LEW asked, do you ever get someone who comes to you for a reading, but no information comes to you to pass on? What would cause this to happen? So this used to be a huge, huge fear for me, and also part of that self-doubt. I would, wait, I'd be like, oh, Spirit, I want a client. I want to be able to connect with somebody. And then they'd be like, okay, here's a client. And then I freak out. I'm like, oh, why'd you give me a client? And it was that fear of not being able to connect with them. What I have learned through working in this field and then also through classes is that the connection and building that trust with Spirit hasn't failed me. Now, I may not always get the information that they're specifically asking. And, we are taught we can push through. We can, if somebody comes to you and they say they want to talk to their father that passed away, that we can push through and that person will show up. But one thing that has happened to me is I know I can only give the information to my clients that Spirit's giving to me. And so while Spirit may come in and let's say somebody's asking a question about work, and they might say, yep, work's going fine. And that's all Spirit gives me on that. And then they're like, but we want to talk about this. And they may be bringing up some things that person needs within the moment to heal. Sometimes they don't want to hear that. And that's hard because Spirit is really comes through to try to reach that person with what they think needs to be given to them to help them heal, to help them process through. One thing I am actually learning in a class that I am currently taking on deepening my message that I give to clients, especially in the mediumship setting, is to not push through the spirits that come through to find a specific person. So when, somebody comes through and maybe it's not the person that somebody's asking to talk to, what I do in my readings is say, okay, I have this person coming in. I'm going to leave space at the end to try to connect with the other person, but we have to give this communicator their time and their space to get through the message to you that they feel you need to hear. And it's been a very interesting class because I have spent a lot of time when I'm doing my readings, especially within mediumship, to quickly get that information, give it out, and keep moving through. I don't let the story unravel. I don't let it expand because I'm trying to give you proof. This is the person. Here's their message. Who wants to come in next? And what I have had happen, and I've had it happen recently in a mediumship sitting that I was doing for a client, I was giving them all the information, and the whole time I'm giving the information and I'm asking, the communicator to answer my questions so that I can give these things instead of just letting the communicator talk to me. At the end of the session, I still had the communicator here with me, and they're like, no, you have to tell her about the dog. And I'm like, that's not going to make any sense. That doesn't tie into anything. But I give what I get. And I said to her, hey, this is what Spirit's bringing up and the communicator's bringing up. And the client became very emotional. And she said, that's the most important thing that you could have told me. And so now, since taking this class, I am looking back going, what if I would have just went with that? Because that's what I got in the beginning, and let that story unfold. Would that client have received a deeper meaning message versus me trying to lead the conversation? And so that's a new approach. That's something that, I'm just learning, but I haven't not had the information come in. I have had some people that, especially for psychic readings, that I find can be a little bit more difficult to connect with and to talk to. And sometimes that's because they're coming in with skepticism. Sometimes it's because it's almost like they're afraid, what are you going to tell them? And so I feel like they inadvertently try to block some things from that space that they are hoping maybe you won't pick up on. And sometimes when I have clients who are distracted, so maybe they're sitting in their car, maybe they're driving, maybe they have a lot of background noise, and I can almost pick up on that distraction from them, that can make it hard for me to give what I feel is a quality reading. But I do feel that in any time when somebody sits down with you, if you can relax and connect with that energy, you will get the information that they need to hear. And again, that fear of not getting any information really, again, is that self-limiting and limiting ourselves. Moving on to another question that I received from Shelby R. She asks, what are your telltales when spirit is present? Like, how do you know? And I thought that was a great question. For me, the best way I can describe it is, when picture you're going to a venue, maybe you're going to a concert and you start out in the parking lot and you're just walking with the person you're with and you're going in together. And as you're going together, you enter, up the steps and you go into the lobby and there's more people. You can feel that change of energy. And then you step into the venue and it's very crowded and it starts to feel very close. Or imagine you're sitting alone in a living room, kind of self-involved, maybe watching TV, and somebody walks into the room behind you. You can feel that energy. You can feel the presence of that other person. Or like as a mom, when you're sleeping and all of a sudden you're like, I feel like there's somebody in the room, and you open your eyes and you're like, ah, because your child's right at eye level staring at you. So it's very much similar to that for me, is feeling within my body, within the space, my aura, of that change of energy. And I will start to feel that closeness. And it depends, sometimes it takes a little bit more if it's just one spirit. I remember back when my husband and I were looking for houses, and, we went into one house, and I instantly felt like I was in a crowd and looking over my shoulder, and later came to find out that house was used as a funeral home. So it depends on the scenario, but it's feeling that change within my energy field of who's coming close, feeling like somebody's moving in next to me. When I am connecting then on that mediumship level, and I feel that closeness, then spirit will usually move into my right side to talk to me and to connect with me. And so that's how I usually know that they aren't just hanging around, that they want to talk or they have something to say, because then they'll move in on my right side. And not all the time, there's spirits, there's past loved ones around us pretty consistently, and we may not always pick up on it. We may not always feel it. People who maybe don't pick up on the energy fields, but maybe you have animals. Watch your animals. I have cats and dogs, and there's lots of times where you'll see them, maybe watching something that you're not physically seeing or you're not physically feeling. So for people who are kind of out there wondering, well, how do I know if something's around when I don't pick up on those kinds of vibes? That's another way to kind of tell. And Sherry, I see that you're asking about your baby sister passing away several years ago, and is she watching over her grandbabies? You know, I would say yes. I do feel like a lot of us, we kind of pop back in. We will pop in, we'll check on people we care about, we're still very involved. You know, there's a poem that I had read that talked about people passing and the change within the relationship. And it's like they're consistently always in the next room. It's that feeling of they're there, but we just can't see them. And what I like to tell people is, while the type of relationship has changed, they're still around and they're still present. It's just the type of interaction and the way that they participate in our daily lives has changed. It's no longer in the physical. It's just now moved on to the spiritual. Here's another really great question from Victoria H. And she says, does spirit give you direct answers to your own questions, or does it come in the form of choices? For example, if you want a new career and you ask spirit what direction you should go, would they present you with a direct answer, routes, or multiple options? And said guidance you receive from spirit, how much of that is influenced by your own energy? Can we truly read for ourselves? And I think that is a great kind of way to look at things, because my husband and I joke, like, you know, we'll stop at the gas station and he's like, what are the winning numbers? And I'm like, it doesn't work like that. Like, it doesn't. I can't just be like 8, blah, 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 and woo, I hit, you know, the Powerball. It doesn't work that way. And I look at, when I am looking for guidance for myself, I look at that as prayer, as meditation, sitting down and connecting to my higher self, connecting to source, connecting to God, and having that one-on-one conversation. And, you know, I think everything that you kind of presented in there, sometimes I do feel like I get a direct answer. Sometimes I do feel like there's choices. So I feel like it depends what the topic of the conversation is, or what you're seeking, not validation, but seeking understanding or clarification on. I don't think, at least in my experience, that spirit really comes in and makes it easy for us, because even with sitting here and saying, spirit, should I go on to doing a talk show? Should I go on to following a career path within the metaphysical? I would get answers, but I wasn't trusting. And so there's those other aspects of self-limiting. And so I think knowing within your body the resignation of where you connect with spirit, like for me, mediumship's on the right. Usually when I'm getting psychic information, it comes from up here on my left. And I've learned that when it's my ego, when it's not a true intuitive answer, it comes in my body differently. It's a different voice. It shows up in my mind differently within my thought process. And that has helped me, because I worry a lot. And that has helped me, you know, I'll have these fears come in, or these other things come into my mind. But now that I can separate where things enter and how they feel within my body, I'm like, oh, that's not intuition. That's fear. Why am I feeling this fear? So learning to know where your answers come in, how things resonate within your body, how to separate things, I think helps us understand when it's our own energy versus spirit coming in to try to help us, to try to guide us, to try to give us clarification. I do feel a lot of times when I'm sitting down and I'm connecting with spirit, I am not always given that clear-cut answer. I'm not always given yes or no. It's more, like you said, choices. They're sitting there and they're saying, well, you have 3 choices, this, or this. And the way you go, the way people within those choices interact with you are all going to influence the end outcome. And so I do think we can truly look for insight for ourselves. I don't feel that we can truly read for ourselves, if that makes sense. So I feel like, you know, sometimes I'll pull a card if I'm looking for validation or something like that. Or like I said, I'll sit down, I'll meditate, and I'll pray about things. But you have to know and understand where the information's coming in differently. And if you can't separate that, then I don't think you're going to get a true intuitive message for yourself or a true read, because in those cases, I do feel like it's our own energy that can come in and influence, you know, what we're thinking. How many times have we sat down and maybe got a gut feeling and we ignored it because our brain overrode it? And then what we chose to do maybe wasn't the best option. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. So while I do think we can seek clarification for ourselves and intuitive messages, I don't know that we can read in a true sit down and hey, figure out life. If we could, it would make things so much easier, people, so much easier. But then we would miss out on different aspects of our journey. And that's really why we're here. We are here for those aspects of our journey and our growth. So I have a great question here from Dayette Renee, who's also a teacher. She's my teacher. She's a certified psychic medium, and she will be on the show next week. So we are going to be doing some live readings next week, but we'll talk about that later. And she asked, how do you push yourself out of your comfort zone? And do you find growth from it? Do your gifts change over time? So how do I push myself out of my comfort zone? I get a teacher like Dayette, because let me tell you, she pulls no punches. She's totally okay with spirit tricking you into doing things like hosting for her and ending up on your own talk show. So find somebody, a mentor, somebody who is going to push you and inspire you to move out of that comfort zone and hold you accountable for those things. You know, they're not just going to let you move out of your comfort zone and then be like, oh yeah, and then back out. Find somebody that's going to hold you accountable, which I'm very fortunate to have found her as a teacher. And now other people within the community and fellow students, where we all hold each other accountable. We all hold each other to calling out on our BS, our self-limitations, and saying, why are you doing this? So find a good support group is what I would say. And I do think that I find growth from it. I mean, gosh, if any of you guys sat down and talked to Dayette about when her and I first met, and she was teaching a class. I took one of her first beginners classes, and I went into that class literally riddled with fear. Like, oh man, what if my mom finds out what I'm doing? What if so-and-so finds out what I'm doing? Like, whew, what if all these other students in here know that I can see spirit? And I had all these self-doubts. I sat in a corner. I sat by myself. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to connect. But throughout the course of that day and that class, I found myself making connections with people. I started realizing the acceptance within the community. And that led to more exploration, more growth, more diving into the metaphysical profession. And so I think we always continue to grow. You never want to stop growing. You want to continue, you know, taking classes with different mentors, working with different groups, and expanding your knowledge. Because if any of us just sat within one knowledge, we're not going to be able to offer and reach the diverse groups that we're called to help. And so I do feel that there's a lot of growth in everything that you push through, that you try, that is outside of your comfort level. And as far as gifts and abilities changing over time, absolutely. Absolutely. I find that there's times where I may physically see things more, or maybe I'll shift and I will start becoming very sensitive to sound, to noises, where I can be sitting down here in my office and I hear something going on upstairs and I'm like, what is this noise? And it is like killing my ears. And I'll go upstairs and I'll dig through and I'll find that, you know, it's one of the kids' remotes sitting on the shelf, vibrating from a video game. But and I call it like my ears turning on, because I will pick up on these super quiet sounds that sometimes, like the fish filter going through, that you hear every day and you overlook, but all of a sudden it becomes so loud. And I feel bad actually for my family in those times, because it gets very stressful. I get so oversensitized where I'm just like, I can't do any more noise. And so, yes, I think your gifts and abilities change. I think they adapt sometimes or change when you're working with different clientele within different situations. And it's like, I don't know, if you're working on a construction project, you use multiple tools. You don't, just use one screwdriver and a hammer. So it's very similar to that being your tool case and allowing those abilities to change, allowing different things to come in at different times when you need them. Jill A asks, as you awaken, how do you understand what your path is? How does spirit guide you? Man, I don't know if I understand what my path is in a true sense. I feel like spirit will often come in and give us little glimpses of our path or of our next step. But at least for me, I really don't know what the whole path is or the whole big picture outside of servitude to spirit, and helping people heal, helping educate people. And I do feel, though, as we are growing, as we are going through experiences, that is how spirit helps to guide us. We have certain experiences so we can pull those in later, especially within the servitude of spirit, to help other people. And so, especially if there's a pattern within your life, look at what that pattern is. Look at, why are you making those choices? Why are those people coming in? Why are these things happening? And how you've responded to them. Has it been consistent through all the experiences? Are you adapting how you're responding to the experiences? And if you're noticing that, it's a pattern, well, why? Especially if it's something negative. How do I want to break it? How do I want to grow from this and try a different approach? So I feel like that is one way that spirit really will come in and help guide us. Other times it's looking for small signs. For me, when I was still at my day job and I was looking like I was really considering leaving and moving into this field, and I'm like, I'm crazy, spirit, I don't know if this is the right decision. And I wasn't listening to spirit at that point, because I was kind of stuck within my frustration. And I was at work and I happened to turn and they had some papers and stuff stacked there. And there was a slip. It was like this big, like a note packet of a pink pad. And it's just one where you jot down, hey, so-and-so called, returning the call, those kinds of things. But I hadn't seen that for years. I mean, years, we're talking like 10, 11 years. But that's something that used to sit on my grandfather's desk. And that's also where I got, Charlie from, like we have talked about. And to me, that was my reinforcement. That was a sign from spirit of, hey, we are on the other side. We are supporting you. We are here. We are ever present. And so watching for those signs, don't try to push them away. Don't try to explain them away. Take the signs as they come within that moment. So we are going to take another quick station break. When we come back, we'll wrap up our questions. We'll be doing a card pull to offer some inspiration and insight for your week ahead, and talking about some things coming up later this week. So we'll see you guys all back in about a minute.
Meet Nicole Strickland, one of the leading San Diego paranormal researchers. Nicole offers a gentle and humble approach to working with spirit energies. Being the founder of the San Diego Paranormal Research Society, Nicole is no stranger to the unknown. Due to Nicole's vast knowledge of the paranormal, she is widely sought after for speaking engagements on topics like children of the paranormal,
Paranormal Investigation 101 and 102, History of Spiritualism, and more. Not only does Nicole research the afterlife, but also writes about it, and is the author of several books pertaining to the paranormal and its history. She has appeared on television shows like My Ghost Story, Travel Channel's Famously Afraid, Good Morning San Diego, and more. Have a conference or event coming up? Contact Nicole on her website, authornicolestrickland.com. That's authornicolestrickland.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. If you're just tuning in, you are on, or I'm on, I guess you guys are watching Chat with Charlie. I'm your host, Charlie Lynn, on WLTK-DB Talk Radio. And I'm just going to answer one more question so that we can move on to cards. So while I'm shuffling the cards and answering the next questions, I'm hearing 4. So I'm going to pull 4 cards. So really kind of focus on what you have going on. And, you know, you could pick 1, you could pick 2, you could pick all 4, you could just pick 4. So however you want to do it, just focus on that. But Ann Z had asked, how old are you when you realized you had gifts? And I know I've kind of talked about this before, and some of you might know, but I was about 12 or 13. And I realized looking back, I always had abilities. I grew up in a house that was built in the 1850s. And so I was always seeing interesting things. And I never realized that not everybody sees interesting things. Not everybody feels these things that I was experiencing. But I remember clearly, and it's kind of funny because, you know, I like horror movies. And I was at my grandma's house, and she had just the TV on. You know, back then we didn't have Netflix or all the fun stuff. We had to watch what was on TV. And The Shining was on. And it's a part within The Shining where the caretaker and the boy are talking. And they're talking, you know, just in their mind, which I used to do with my Nana, my great-grandmother, all the time. And he had explained to the boy that what they were doing, he called The Shining. And not everybody could do it. And that was like a huge light bulb went off for me, because I'm like, what do you mean not everybody does these things? And so that's when I really probably started expressing some of the things that were going on, and realizing that my experiences were a lot different from most people I knew. So 13, really 12, 13 is when it became clear to me that I was a little different. I mean, I am different, but in that other sense too. So. All right, we are going to do our cards. And thank you, everybody that has commented and sent in questions. I really appreciate you. All right, if you picked card number 1, the card is Refuge. And I really feel like this is speaking to having a lot going on in your life right now, and needing that time to focus, to kind of separate yourself from the things that are going on, to not only give yourself clarity, but more, again, for that self-care, for that self-support, and stepping away. So if you picked number 1, I feel like right now you have a whole lot going on in your life that you kind of just need to, even if it's a few minutes, step out, go sit on the deck for a few minutes, drink a cup of coffee, but just remove yourself and calm your mind from some of the craziness that's going on, regenerate, and then step back in. I think that will really help, because I feel it. Like I feel all this weight on my shoulders and just that need of having space to breathe. So try to find that space. Card number 2, if you picked card number 2, is Energy. Okay. And I really feel like if you pulled card number 2, this does not necessarily just speak of feeling energized or feeling drained, or physical energy. This is talking more about feeling the energy collectively of what is going around you. Because I feel like a lot of times, again, we put our mind into things and we let things that are energetic or intuitive going on around us, we try to explain it away. We try to push it away. And so if you picked card number 2, this is really spirit coming in, talking about connecting to the energy around you. I think you'll find a lot of clarity within that, especially if there's situations going on that you're not sure about, that you need truthfulness within, connecting to that energy, connecting to spirit, allowing that energy to come in and intuitively help you and support you, and really getting like the vibe, if that makes sense. I feel like there's more going on when you see this card than what you can see with your physical eye, and you have to move into that intuition to understand what's going on and get insight on that. Card number 3 is the hummingbird card. Joy. I think this card came up last week too. And if you picked card number 3, I think it really speaks to giving yourself, again, having that time to have fun, to kind of lighten up a little bit, to just be present within the happy times, within the fun, create some of that, let go and step out of some of the craziness that's going on. We can't be all work and all stress and no play. So if you're looking at joy and really having a lot going on, I think this card is really speaking to you of finding some separation, moving off to the side and allowing some of those frustration things to kind of fall off and just find things to be happy about, to allow the joy to come in. And if you've been going through some hard times, I feel like this really is talking about a change coming, about better days ahead. You know, sometimes we can get into when there's all this chaos and just kind of become depressed or frustrated. But no, there's better days ahead. Joy is coming. Joy is always there. And the last card, if you picked number 4, I struggle with this one. This is patience, right? So when I see this card today, it really makes me think about having patience for things to unravel, for things to open up and present themselves. I know, especially for me, when I get into this place where I've set aside my self-doubt and I'm starting to take all these steps, I expect things to start opening and things to go a little faster sometimes. But sometimes we have to wait within the patience, whether it's a timing thing. We have to wait for things to become clear, for people that are also involved within the journey of what's going on to get to where they need to be for things to unfold. So if you picked patience, know that things are coming within Spirit's time. We cannot force things to unfold within our own time frame. So that's funny, Erica. She says energy and patience. Yep, sounds about right. So waiting for foundations sometimes to be built so that you can continue to progress. Okay. So again, we'll go through the cards really quick. 1 is refuge. 2 is energy. 3 is joy. And 4 is patience. Okay, so before I let you guys all go, let's talk about some very exciting things that are coming up on Chat with Charlie the next 2 weeks. So next week, we will have Psychic Medium and Master Teacher Dayette Renee on the show. We will be answering some live psychic questions and other questions revolving around mediumship, psychic abilities. So please, if you have questions, we will answer some of the psychic ones live, but if you have other things that you want to know about, send in those questions, okay, to chatwcharlie@gmail.com. Send those in ahead of time, because when we're doing live psychic readings, the show can go very fast and become hectic. So if you're looking to understand a resource where you can take classes, things like that, I want to make sure we get those answered before we move into the psychic portion of the show. The following week, on the 26th, we are going to have Maria Celeste on, and she has this awesome book that she self-published called Little Book of Healing Stones. All my stone people, if you have questions, if you want to know about certain stones, certain minerals, how it affects your energy field, that is a show you do not want to miss. She is fantastic. She is extremely knowledgeable. And again, if you have specific questions where you're looking for resources, you're looking for specifics basically on different stones, send those questions in early so that we can make sure they are answered. And then we will be going through the comments. And you can purchase that book directly from Maria Celeste. So if you are interested, I have the book right here. Excuse me while I duck down. And I don't know if you guys can see it. So it's Maria Celeste, Little Book of Healing Stones. Okay, so if you contact Maria Celeste Provenzio Cook, she will send you out a copy. And it's fantastic because I cannot retain all the knowledge on stones and what I need to help with what. It's fantastic. So again, next week, Dayette will be on. The following week, Maria Celeste. I want to thank you guys all for tuning in today for my show, Chat with Charlie. I hope you enjoyed it and come back in a week for more shared revelations and discussions. As a reminder, please submit questions via email to me at chatwcharlie@gmail.com. Also, if you are fascinated by all that goes bump in the night, paranormal, metaphysical, and spiritual, you'll want to check out some of the other amazing shows on WLTK-DB Talk Radio. So tonight, Thursday, starting at 7 p.m., you have Renee and Ashley hosting Realm of Darkness, followed by the Afterlight Chronicles with Nicole Strickland at 8. Friday, be sure to tune in for Renee Rodriguez at 7 p.m. for her show, The Secrets Within. Monday at 9, catch up with Dayette on School Through Spirit. And Monday, Dayette is going to be gone. So I will be your guest host again. And I have some fantastic people coming in. We are going to be doing live readings next Monday on School Through Spirit. I'm going to have Cherie, Ellie, and Anne all on the show as a panel to help answer questions and discuss their abilities with you. So you don't want to miss it. Later that day, the fantastic Christina Bloom will be on Be the Change at 8. Tuesday, Pete Orbea will be hosting Paranormal Pete at 10. And finally, on Wednesdays, you can find Kelly Brickle at 3 p.m. hosting the Psychic Hour, followed by Missy and Nicole with Over the Target at 8. I will see you next week right here for another episode of Chat with Charlie. Until then, many blessings and joy. I'm your host, Charlie Lynn.